speak a lot about in other videos / podcasts in order to try to afford that. I didn't have a JD degree, which is a law degree. I still don't, but I want to get one. And, that's a whole saga in and of itself. Had I had one, things would have turned out better and differently because I would have taken it to open public court for all of the world to see the truth. And it would have all been public. But instead, I did Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the Merit System Protection Board and Office Special Counsel. And all that just proved to be a massive waste of time. I mean, documents came out of some of it. I mean, yeah, some of it, 2 of the 3 things. Which, exposed even more of the truth that I already knew. But the reality is, when I worked there, I did file a congressional complaint, and it did reveal information confirming, different allegations I had made and confirmed that they had been substantiated in part. And I still have that documentation. I have a box full of documents and a hard drive full of documents as well. And so no one should have to have an employer that they have to file congressional complaints against or inquiries. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I know it's the government and all, but no one should have to work at a place where filing a congressional inquiry is even necessary. That's outrageous. It's outrageous that anything should be so mismanaged and self-serving or corrupt or whatever you want to call it, that even happens. My experience with this organization is that there's a lot of cruelty towards military veterans and the people who are trying to serve them. That's been my direct experience. And I've been experiencing this for years and years and years now. And it's a really bad organization. And I wish I could say better of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, but I can't. And there are good people that work there, mostly in subordinate positions, is the conclusion I've come to. And there's a lot of turnover in those positions because of the way people are being treated throughout the organization. My experience was not an isolated incident. I unfortunately saw in the news during my employment towards the end, when I knew I wasn't going to be staying with the organization, that my story was widespread and it was really commonplace. And it was just ubiquitous. It was everywhere. It was all over. It wasn't one facility. It wasn't one region. It was all over. So it's not an uncommon story. And so now as a military veteran, and cruel, by the way, I was threatened with this sanction for using that word. I think I put that I'm pretty sure I did an illegal filing, and I was threatened with a sanction from the administrative judge for saying that. I was cautioned from using words like that again. I was cautioned because let's all be cautious of calling out the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs for being corrupt or for being cruel. Okay, or inhumane towards people. This is an organization that has succeeded in destroying people's lives, turning people's lives upside down, and getting away with it. Both military veterans and the people who support them that work there, that try to do their jobs every day, okay? That's the truth about the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And it's about damn time we start acknowledging it. Now, the news media has done a fantastic job, some of them, of portraying this through the years. But there's not enough people out there with voices willing to be heard. And places like the Equal Opportunity Commission, and thanks to Congress's inaction, the Merit System Protection Board, and they're just burying these complaints, okay? They're burying them. That's what's happening. My complaint, I initially filed with the Office of Resolution Management. Actually, I'm going to type up a banner right now. Office of Resolution Management belongs to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. They belong exclusively to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, to the best of my knowledge and understanding, unless something has changed, not to other federal agencies. Thank you, Jesus, because other federal agencies do not need to be plagued with the Office of Resolution Management, ORM. The process when I worked there, and I doubt it's much different, but when I worked there, the process was that you were supposed to file a complaint of the activity that was going on, whatever it was that fell underneath civil rights law, basically, which can cover many things, okay? And then it was supposed to be investigated, and this was supposed to be an independent entity, and that is totally false. That's total BS, okay? And they're supposed to come in and do an independent, objective investigation to not to determine, but to elicits information and facts that would determine ultimately whether or not illegal behavior had occurred that violated the civil rights laws, okay? Well, that was not my experience, all right? So I filed a complaint. I can't remember, it's been so long ago, but it was early on in the employment because so much stuff was going on. It wasn't until right before I quit my job. Like, I was literally out of the department that I'd been working in and detailed off to Never Never Land because the retaliation was so severe. It was just so wild, the whole situation. And that's when they finally showed up all these months later to investigate. And let me tell you, that investigation was not investigation. It was a freaking cover up, because that's what they do. The Office of Resolution Management, in my direct experience, and yes, I still have the 1,088 page report, which is mostly filled with the policy statements of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, where they say, they paper the whole wall saying, we don't do bad things. We don't engage in illegal behavior. But they do. Trust me. Okay. Been there, dealt with that. And then they didn't even interview all of the people, the witnesses that they should have interviewed. Okay. I brought this up to the judge during my pre-hearing conference, by the way, which of course isn't recorded, because in my opinion, the EEOC doesn't want you to know what's happening in these conferences, these pre-hearing conferences or other meetings. Okay. They don't. That's why there's no court reporter. And then the order that is generated from those conferences, pre-hearing conference I was in, don't accurately reflect 100% of what actually occurred. There's actually people have had full-on like meltdowns over the EEOC about this type of stuff. And then the judge, in some cases end up like sanctioning them, or like taking like dismissing their case. Well, I saved everyone the trouble. I dismissed my own case right before the hearing. So I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to show up to a hearing where I'm not even going to be heard. Like, what's the point? I mean, literally, what is the point? The whole system is rigged. And so almost a year passes. And that was like the entire time I worked there. All these months pass, several months, upwards, you're not here, but several months before the Office of Resolution Management even comes in to investigate, aka cover up what happened. And I was literally questioned, and I would call it an interrogation, because that's exactly what I perceive it as being, for almost 8 hours about what I reported and what happened. And one day, straight through, no lunch break. I got bathroom breaks, so I did get those, and I drank some water. And then I was also at this facility at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs asked another hour worth of questions prior to that about what happened and what I reported. So now we're up to almost 9 hours of questioning. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission administrative judge, like by the time I got to the hearing, which was, okay, so in 2014, I started working there. In 2015 winter, I quit the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs facility. It wasn't until 2021. That's right. You heard that right. I quit my job in the winter of 2015 at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And then in 2021, they were going to have a hearing at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission about that. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't. I actually talked to a lawyer recently this year, I think it was. Yeah, it was this year, who was telling me, I talked to several lawyers who told me that their cases at the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, I'll go ahead and put that up real quick because I know it's probably like not really just quite a lot, that their cases were taking an average of 5 to 7 years to resolve. And many of those cases were losing because civil rights cases in general are very hard cases to win with regard to American workers trying to protect their civil rights in America's workplaces. That is the reality of it. And I'm doing a whole series right now on this topic called Did You Know? It was filmed with my phone camera, video camera, many months ago. And I was waiting until after the hearing to release information, the hearing that I would never end up even going to. Anyways, so 2021 happens, and the case becomes alive in late 2020. I was on a hamster legal wheel doing all this legal work myself. It was just, anyways. And so then after I dismissed my own case, I filed a motion to dismiss my own case. By the way, the only motion, to the best of my recollection, that was actually approved by the administrative judge this time, because I had 3 judges, because they rotate judges, I learned, the EEOC, like musical freaking chairs. Okay. So my 3rd judge, that judge, to the best of my recollection, unless I'm missing something, which it was such a paperwork fiasco, who knows? But to the best of my recollection, did not approve any of my motions at all, except for the one to dismiss my own case. I mean, like, what does that tell you? And then I got this email from the judge who typically doesn't like email. I mean, I got tons of auto messages about that or whatever, emails about that from this judge, said that, okay, I like already didn't want to have to be questioned again about this during the hearing. I wanted to use the 2 days that we were supposed to have, business days, and those hours to go ahead and like question the people involved, which were a lot of people. And so no, like my witnesses weren't allowed to testify. The key witnesses, a good number of them, the managers were. You know, one of the witnesses was so scared, they sent an email trying to get out of testifying. The office's general counsel had to, you know, tell them, I saw the email, CC'd on it, that, you know, they were legally obligated to testify even if they didn't want to in EEOC proceedings as a federal employee, which is true. And, you know, I got this email though from the judge saying the timetable, because I will be fair and I will say to the Office of General Counsel's credit for OGC, which is legal arm of the VA, they were like, yeah, you know, they submitted a document and it was a timetable that we were supposed to agree on. And it was just basically saying a lot of things. It was saying that we basically don't agree, you know, on this. And, you know, she doesn't want to, she thinks that testifying for this long is excessive. And, you know, this is what we want. And that was fair because that was representative of the truth of, you know, we disagreed. Okay. Anyways. And so the judge comes back and this is just like what was happening the whole time. Like there was, in my opinion, there's judicial bias. And I think that when you're pro se representing yourself, which is what that is, pro se representing yourself, there's going to be a lot of bias. Courtroom 5, which is a legal software that I utilized during this time period, actually talked about judicial bias, which I didn't watch their training on that, but judicial bias against, you know, pro se litigants. And it was covered in their podcast as well. And I'll link to the Courtroom 5 in the description below this video so you guys can check that out. But, you know, I was going to just talk about congressional complaints, but obviously this is something that's really on my mind because, you know, I went through over 5 years, maybe 6 years of hell. And it was just, there was no justice. And it felt like this cruel joke and everyone was in on it but me, the cruel joke. And so the day that I dismissed my case, you know, I got an email from the judge who hadn't seen the motion that I'd filed to dismiss my own case. And it said on the timetable that it had been increased the number of hours this was testified. So I was expected to testify for 3 hours. 3 hours. I was expected to testify for 3 hours about what happened after I'd already testified for upwards of 9 hours, almost 9 hours, not quite, but almost 9 hours combined total. On the record, almost 8 of those hours were transcribed. There was transcripts. And they were all accurate because I read every single page and I submitted corrections every single page. And there were a lot of pages. And I was expected to go through 3 more hours of testifying. Keep in mind, one of the higher level executives is what I'll refer to the person as, executives involved in the case, was only, and I had wanted the person to testify for about an hour because there had a lot of questions that weren't unanswered and weren't in the record because they were never interviewed. Go figure. They were only going to be required by the administrative judge to testify and for me to be able to ask questions, not the other side, but for me specifically to be able to ask questions for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That's not what justice or accountability looks like. But that is the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and they're enablers. According to Management Directive 110, which I refer to as the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission Bible, it says many things, but it makes it very clear that the EEOC's mission is supposed to be to eradicate discrimination in the federal workplace. Okay, eradicate discrimination in the workplace, and I was on the federal track of the EEOC, is what I'll call it, and it's been referred to like that in public, you know, as well by others like lawyers. And you know, I'm not a lawyer, don't have a law degree, don't have a law background, not a licensed lawyer, I'm not a lawyer at all. This is not legal advice. Okay. With that said, like, I firmly believe that the EEOC is a taxpayer-funded sham, and they're not the only ones. I don't think this is any better. Okay, all these things I'm flashing by. I don't think it's any better. The only entity that seems to be getting shit done is this Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General. Like, they're constantly in the news, and I don't think it's propaganda either, because they've actually made some serious headway. The Office of Inspector General, which belongs to the Veterans Affairs, they have their own. They're the only ones that are making headway. So the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Office of Inspector General seems to be like really on it, which is kind of crazy, like how on it they are. But even if they worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I still don't think they'd be able to cover up, get all the corruption taken care of. You know what I'm saying? Like all the mismanagement and everything, all these facilities nationwide. And, that executive I mentioned was going to have to testify 20 minutes. 10 minutes was going to be given to opposing counsel, which was these people that I'm flashing on the screen: U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Office General Counsel, OGC, their legal arm. And I was only going to get 10 minutes. I was only at 10 minutes. And that's just not right or fair. And, there were so many people I wanted to have testify that weren't allowed to testify. And I'm going to get to that in different videos. I wasn't planning to spend this much time on these videos. And, right now, like, I'm recording this and I'm planning on making sure that all of my documents from the EEOC are on a hard drive, just in case, because, it was just like really apparent to me that they, meaning like the people like that are empowering stuff, like they don't want this to be out in the open, all this stuff. And I believe the reason that I was being strung along for so long inside the facilities because the management didn't want me to publicly talk about what was happening. And I think that they're concerned that I would eventually, or it could happen. And these entities, these government entities like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, yeah, they're underfunded and under-resourced, and I 100% acknowledge that in another video I did. There's no doubt about it. There's definitely people lobbying against civil rights in America's workplaces and trying to chip away at the ability to enforce the civil rights. But with that said, like, the EEOC is much more aggressive from what I've seen at taking on non-governmental civilian companies, which is amazing, versus taking on these federal agencies, in my opinion. And yeah, you may see, and I do see too, an occasional win. And there are wins for people that go through this process, but the large majority are not. And it's not because people are necessarily lying. It's because the way these cases are being handled. Yes, civil rights laws are weak. They're like Swiss cheese for American workers, but it's the way these cases are being handled. It's not just that there is lying people. And I saw an article written about that, and it was just horrifying. It's like, people aren't just making this up. Like, that's not what this is. I mean, do you have the outliers? Sure, but that's not the large majority, I don't believe. And that wasn't my case. And so I was going to be expected for a grand total between the EOC 3 hours at the hearing and the almost 9 hours at the facility for over these 5+ years to testify about this for about 12 hours time. And, I was treated worse than a criminal. Criminals in America, people that are being charged with crimes, have more rights than people fighting for their civil rights in America's workplaces, especially if they're in a federal workplace, is what I learned. And my civil rights and my legal rights were violated when I worked at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. I was a whistleblower. Those rights were violated. And it's not okay. And it's happening to other people, and it's been happening. And they don't hold people accountable. And I've talked about this in a live stream I did, a live event, about how even if you win, it's not really a win because no one's actually held accountable. They're not being terminated from their positions and at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and my understanding elsewhere in these federal agencies. Instead, they're being retained, and they're able to wreak havoc in other areas of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and to create new victims and destroy more lives. And that's the truth. And they're doing it all on a taxpayer-funded payroll with benefits in retirement. That's the truth. When you have organizations engaging in this kind of misconduct, it has the ability to turn just people's lives upside down in a way that you can't quite imagine. And it's really brutal, and it's really despicable. It's really despicable. And, when you have super emphasized employers, there's communities that where you have families, multiple members of the same family, working for that employer. And so it just really rips away at the fabric of that family and ultimately the community when these things are happening. And they are happening. They are happening. There was a wonderful news article that was done by the Daily Caller many years ago, and it showed an interactive US map where it showed managers, not just managers, forgive me, managers and other types of employees where they've been accused of different things or whatever, and they were being tracked. They literally had crisscrossed all across the country, all these different people, and had all these different lines, and that's the reality. And that just enables serial predators, people that are preying upon other people, to continue on doing it. It perpetuates this. And there's this thing called Management Directive 110, which I'll probably never forget for as long as I live. I will link it below in the description here. And, I've read that and it was really eye-opening, and I will give credit where credit is due. And I'm not trying to give a bunch of props, by the way, to U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Office of General Counsel of the Lawyers at all. Like, at all. Not at all. Because, there were... I was defamed by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Management, and it was perpetuated by their Office of General Counsel. And, they just backed up those defamatory statements, and it's not okay. And just because something's legal doesn't make it right. Right? Just because it's legal does not make it right. And there's a lack of morality in the law, and that's pretty messed up. Anyways, but the Office of General Counsel, the one of their lawyers, had sent me a link as I was emailing back and forth with them in this case, just to the man telling me there was a Management Directive 110, and then linking or telling me it was online. And so I found it very quickly, and I read it. I read a lot of it. And that's when I realized how messed up this whole EEOC process really was. And I realized there was such a lack of oversight just in general, it looked like, but specifically in my case. So after I quit my job in winter 2015, the investigation from the, where's that? I'm trying to find it here. Basically the Office of Resolution Management, it concluded, and it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't anything legit. There were people lying in there and stuff, and it was really obvious because they couldn't keep their lies straight and hadn't consulted with each other, certain members of management, before they started lying under oath. But, there's no accountability for that at all. It's just unreal. And now, because they got away with all this, that's the scary part. And that's what scares me as being a veteran, being reliant upon the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs at all. And then how big it keeps getting is just that they're getting better at getting away with illegal behavior at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, because they're learning off of their mistakes. They're going to learn what they did wrong and how to do it better next time, how to cover up stuff next time. And that's the reality of it, in my opinion. You know what I mean? They're going to, practice makes perfect. So, yeah, I will be covering this topic in more videos. There's so much. I just have this box of documents, literally. I don't have it with me right this second. It's stored away. And I think I left it somewhere else, actually, in my hard drive. But anyways, I have a hard drive too, and it's got all these documents, and it's just this box of documents I had to store it away, because it is a box of pain and suffering is what it represents. And the judge didn't really care what I had to say in my little document about suffering, but yeah, pain and suffering, and about corruption at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and about illegal behavior, and about civil rights violations, and about workplace harassment. And it's about an organization that's quite corrupt, the organization that covers it up. And what's worse than all the stuff that actually happened is the covering up of it, and the legal battle that ensued, and dealing with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Office of Resolution Management, which I just mentioned, And then also dealing with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, because for years I held out hope as I moved on with my life and my career and did all the things that, one day there would be justice. And one day I just had this hope. I had this hope that because I'm such a rule follower, that if I followed the rules and I did everything I was supposed to, that there would be some justice. And there just wasn't. And, less than 2 weeks before my hearing, I dismissed my case, and some of you may be like, well, why? Or whatever. And it's like, well, because I couldn't go through any more hell. That's why. I couldn't go through being forced to testify for 3 more hours after I'd already testified for almost 9 hours years ago about this. I couldn't be forced to continue to have to talk about and basically relive these awful things that happened over and over and over and over again, while these people, these managers, get all their lawyers paid for and get defended like nothing happened and get to keep collecting their checks and their benefits and all the things. I just couldn't keep going through it anymore, and I don't believe that my case was handled properly at all. They let my case languish for years. A motion for summary judgment had been filed against my case in I think it was 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And it wasn't until 2020 the case was picked back up. It had been transferred that time from the first judge to the second judge to the third judge. The third judge made a decision about the motion for summary judgment. I partially overcame it, which means that some claims were upheld and then some were not. It's kind of complicated to explain that. Basically, a motion for summary judgment is all about just getting dismissing a case, essentially getting rid of a case. And I'm not a lawyer. Again, having been to law school, but that was what I learned from having represented myself. Anyway, so that was a really big deal. I was able to overcome it. And I felt a huge sense of accomplishment, and I always will, that I was able to do that without a lawyer. And I really want to go to law school now. But at the same time, like, I remember, like, you don't get a choice about when the case gets picked back up. And, justice delayed is justice denied, as the legal maxim goes. Justice delayed is justice denied, as the legal maxim goes. And what I mean by that is basically when a case like mine is basically allowed to languish for years and ignored for years and allowed to drag on and not promptly investigated and not, quite frankly, not even taken seriously. Let's be real here. It denies justice. And so it's like, what? I go into this hearing, I relive these awful things I went through at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm defamed horribly, I'm sure. I'm sure I've been defamed horribly, even though I had an impeccable employment record and all these, I had outstanding performance evaluations. It doesn't matter. It's amazing I was able to survive the retaliation and get through that. But it doesn't matter. It's like all that matters is I opened my mouth and told the truth, and VA management couldn't stand it. This organization's management, Veterans Affairs Management, could not stand that I told the truth. And this is why there's a culture of fear inside of this organization, and people are so freaked out about telling the freaking truth. There was an internal investigation, one of many that was done, but this one was a very honest one by like one of the only honest VA good managers out there, I suspect. I mean, it's amazing this person told the truth, given the fact that they pretty much took their whole life in their hands when they did that. And they did an honest investigation, which I'm not even getting into what prompted that. And they came out, and part of the information that they typed up, which I still have a copy of, by the way, is that they found that, basically people were afraid of retaliation and afraid to speak up because of that. And when they were trying to investigate and ask questions, and they suggested immediate intervention basically in that department because of it. And because they noticed there was a significant turnover, people were quitting their jobs. The EEOC proceedings are very secretive, like it's very private, and filth breeds in darkness is my view. The victims need privacy. They do. These people that are going into the EEOC, many of them have been horribly victimized inside of the federal agency workplaces, some of them, and they really need to be victim advocates, and there really need to be victim rights, and there needs to be compassion for these victims / survivors of these workplace incidences that have occurred that have led them to try to take their cases to the EEOC federal track. And I don't believe that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission should be allowed to continue to operate on the federal track in the way that it currently is. I think that everything needs to be revamped. And it's a very polarized, political, divisive, partisan, in my opinion, agency, despite the fact that I don't think it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be like objective. But the presidents, each president, no matter what party they're from, are able to appoint appointees, is my understanding, to a certain part of the EEOC, and then they make decisions which are very impactful upon people's lives about how things will go with regards to the federal workforce's ability to enforce their civil rights with this agency. And I just don't see this agency as being one that is eradicating discrimination / harassment / retaliation or whatnot underneath the civil rights laws, but in fact enabling it. Because, my experience was at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs that these managers do not take it seriously. It's not taken seriously at all, the EEO laws and complaints process, because I now know they can get away with it, and the victims will suffer and their lives will be destroyed. In many cases, there are many people whose entire health was just ripped apart because of their civil rights being violated and being terrorized in the workplace. The retaliation at Veterans Affairs is one of a kind. They're really great at it, for real. Super great. So, everything just needs to change with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And there's more talking about this stuff, but if you don't terminate the employment of the people creating the problems, then the problems will continue on. And that's just not happening. People are just getting away with a lot of stuff. And it's a lot in management. It's a lot. And the civil service system is contributing to it. And the union, in my opinion, is contributing factor to it. And Merit System Protection Board has been a contributing factor to it, specifically with these managers. And things just really, really, really need to change. And